Hi guys, I'm back with another design for you. This time I have a crochet pullover, and it might look a little bit familiar because I have a cardigan called the Zahora cardigan that I designed a while back using the same stitch, and I'd had some requests for a pullover version of it, and so of course I had to make one, and I love how it turned out. So this one's a little bit different. I'm using a different yarn than the Zahora cardigan, but the same stitch. So I'm using Pima cotton this time, and I actually decided to do two different colors and kind of give it a really subtle striping effect because of the yarn that I used. I think it blends in so nicely. I love how it turned out. You can do this pullover without swapping colors, so you can just do one solid color if you want. But I really like how it looked with the specific colors that I used from Line Brand. So I'm just gonna go ahead and show you the pullover. It's unnamed still. I have a name contest happening right now on my Instagram, but here it is. I'll pop it on really quick. So I used the color Vintage and Sea Glass, and it's just a worsted weight cotton yarn. And then within the pattern, I swapped it out every 2 rows. So because it was every 2 rows, I just picked up the yarn as I went, and there'll be little floats along the side of your panels. That way you have way less ends to weave in, and they will be hidden within the sweater once you get all of the seaming together. So don't cut your yarn, just pick up the yarn as you go every 2 rows. It'll have the little floats on the side. I promise you can't even see them. So here's the sweater. It's very oversized and baggy. I specifically left the sleeves with no shaping, and I did them extra long. I love how long they are. I know a lot of people like to have like super cozy long sleeves for when they have baggy pullovers, and then I thought it would also be cute to roll the sleeves up and give it a cute little cuff. So that's an option as well. But then if you don't want the sleeves as long, you can always adjust the length. It's so easy to customize this to whichever length you want. So the neckline is also really wide and open, so you can wear it off the shoulder. But yeah, I love how it turned out. I'm so excited for it. So I hope you guys like it. But for the pattern, so you will be making the panels from the bottom up, front panel, back panel, and then the 2 sleeves. Let's see, the sizes are like combo sizes because this is so baggy. Like, it can fit a wide range of body sizes and types. If you want to make it even longer and do more of like a dress pullover, you can do that as well. You just add the rows and multiples of 2 until you have the length that you want. And then after you make all the panels, you just seam them together, and that is pretty much it. You add the neckline at the end. It's just 1 round around the neckline to tighten it up a little bit, and that's it. It's a really simple pattern. I love this stitch. This is the Pico mesh stitch, which I used in the Zahora cardigan, and I love that one as well. I'll link to that if you want to check out the cardigan version of it. And then this will be free on my blog, so I'll have that in the description. And then of course it's going to be a Line Brand kit, so I'll link that. And when you get the kit, you get the specific yarn that I use. So here's the yarn I used: Pima cotton, Vintage, and then Sea Glass. And then you can also switch out the yarn colors if you wanted to do different colors than what I have. You can swap them out as well and customize your colors. And then they toss in a copy of the pattern for free. So basically you're just buying the yarn, and then you get a digital link to the pattern, and you can download it. The printable version of it, so you don't have to worry about ads or anything on my blog. And a lot of times they have really good sales over on Line Brand, so I'll make sure to put any information about the sale in my newsletter, so make sure you're following my newsletter for that as well. I always give discounts and coupon codes and freebies all the time, so you can just head to my blog and then subscribe with the little pop-up. This will also be a printable PDF on my Etsy and Ravelry shop as well. And I think that's it. Very simple, straightforward pattern. I hope you guys like it, and thank you guys so much for the support as always. And let me know in the comments if you have any questions, and I'll catch you guys in the next
For this project, you're going to need 2 different colors of worsted weight. I'm using Lion Brand's Pima Cotton in the color Vintage and in the color Sea Glass. You're also going to need a 5mm crochet hook, a pair of scissors, and a needle to weave in your ends, and then maybe a couple of stitch markers as well. So both the front and back panels start off exactly the same with the same amount of chains. So I'm going to show you on the front panel, just create a slip knot. So wrap that yarn around your fingers and then insert your hook and pull through. And then we're going to start off with the correct amount of chains for our size. So I'm making the small version and I'm going to be chaining a total of 78. So just yarn over and pull through the correct amount of chains for your size. You can make sure you're following along with the written pattern to find your correct size if you're doing something different. It has all the stitch counts on my blog post. So after you have the correct chains, we're going to begin row 1. So for row 1 and the second chain from the hook, just work a single crochet. So insert your hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then yarn over, pull through both loops. And then we are going to be skipping some chains. So first you're going to chain 5. So just yarn over and pull through 5 times, and then skip the next 3 chains from your starting chain, and then in the following work a single crochet, and then chain 3, and then work a single crochet all into the same spot. And this is our picot stitch. So we're just going to be repeating this all the way across the row. So after you have worked the single crochet, chain 3 single crochet into the same chain. Again, you're going to chain 5, so yarn over and pull through 5 times, and then skip over the next 3 chains from your starting chain, and then in the following work another picot stitch. So again, in the same chain, work a single crochet. So insert your hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, and then chain 3, and then a single crochet into the same spot again. And then I forgot to mention in the starting chain, make sure when you're doing that you did not do it too tightly. It is going to be looking weird for the first several rows just because of the nature of this mesh stitch. Your rows will look kind of wonky, but in the beginning chain, just make sure you didn't do it too tightly. You just want normal tension in those chains, and then for this row, just work your chains and stitches normally. Repeat this all the way across the row. So picot, chain 5, skip 3, picot all the way across. And here's what I mean, how it looks kind of crazy. It's supposed to look like that. It'll start looking better as you go. So once you reach the end, you can see I'm coming up here on my last few chains. I'm going to finish with my chain 5, skip 3, and then in that final chain, just work our last single crochet stitch. So for the size that I'm making, I have a total of 18 picot stitches in this row. So you can check yours as well if you want to by following the written pattern and seeing what yours is. So that completes row 1, and then for row 2, just go ahead and turn your work, and we're going to start off by chaining 5, and then in that very first chain 5 space is where we're going to start our picot stitch. So make sure you don't skip over this first space right here. So in the middle of that chain 5 space, so in that third chain, in that center chain is where you're going to be working your stitch. Make sure you put it into the actual chain and not the chain space. And then you can really put your hook however you want to in here. It's not going to make a difference how you do it. So whatever is comfortable for you and how you want to put your hook into the chain. And then work your single crochet, chain 3, single crochet all into the same spot. So once you're finished with that picot stitch, we're just going to be doing the same thing that we did in the previous row, except this time we are skipping over the picots for our chain 5. So after you work the picot, chain 5, skip over the picot from the previous row, and then in that center chain 3 of your next chain 5 space, just insert your hook and then work your single crochet, chain 3, single crochet, all into the same spot. And then this is what you're going to be repeating all the way across the row. So just keep going with your picot, chain 5, skip over the picot, work your next picot in the center of the following chain 5, repeat that all the way across, and then I will meet you back at the end of the row to show you how to finish the row and start the third row. Okay, so now we're at the end of the row. I have one chain 5 space left and then that last single crochet. So make sure you don't skip this final chain 5. So in that center chain 3, work your picot stitch, single crochet, chain 3, single crochet, and then we're going to finish off the row by chaining 2. So just 2 this time, and then we're going to finish with a double crochet into that single crochet at the end. So yarn over, insert your hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, and then if you're only using this one color, you can yarn over and finish your pull through. But if you're going to be using 2 different colors like I am, you can bring in your second color because we are going to be switching out every 2 rows. Instead of doing that last yarn over with the current color, I'm going to drop my working yarn and bring in my second color and just place it over the hook, and then just do that last pull through, now holding my new color, which is the sea glass color. And then I'm just going to give a little tug to make sure it's nice and secure. You can knot it later before weaving in the ends. And then this begins row 3. So you're just going to chain 1 and turn your work, now using that new color. And then just work a single crochet into that top of the double crochet from the row below. So 1 single crochet, and then we're going to go back into our repeat. So chain 5, skip over that picot, and then in the center chain 3 of the next chain 5, you're going to work another one. So single crochet, chain 3, single crochet, all into the same spot. So again, you can put your hook in however you want when you're doing these. It really doesn't matter. So single crochet, chain 3, single crochet, and then we're just going to repeat that all the way across the row for row 3. So again, chain 5, picot, chain 5, picot, skipping over as you go, and then I will meet you at the end of the row to show you how to finish it, and then begin the next row. Okay, so now we're at the end of row 3 and we're just going to finish it off with a chain 5, skip over that final picot, and then you want to make sure that you don't forget to do this final stitch here. So this is our beginning chain 5 from the previous row, and you are going to want to work a single crochet stitch into that third chain of the chain 5. So don't skip this part or your shirt will come out uneven and you'll mess up your stitch count. So make sure you get that final single crochet into the third chain of that little loop at the very end. And here's what your top will start to look like. It's looking a little bit more normal now after those first few rows look a little crazy. And so now we're just going to begin row 4, which is just a repeat of row 2. So rows 2 and 3 are what we're going to be repeating throughout the entirety of the pattern, just repeating over and over 2 and 3, which are the 2 rows that I just showed you. And every 2 rows you switch out your yarn colors if you're changing your colors back and forth. So again, you'll start row 4 with a chain 5, and then in that very first chain 5 space, work your picot, and then chain 5 and skip and do that all the way across. And when you get to the end of the row, you're going to switch out your yarn colors again, doing the same way that I showed you previously by doing your last pull through with that color. And then we're also not going to be cutting the colors when we change. We're just going to be bringing up floats. So I'll show that as well. So just continue with the pattern repeat all the way across, and then I'll show you what to do at the end of the row. Okay, so now we're at the end of row 4. I just worked my last picot, and then again we're going to be finishing with a chain 2, And then in that single crochet here is where you're going to work the final double crochet. And instead of yarning over with our current color, just go ahead and drop it. And then you can pick up the first color you used, place it over your hook, and do that last pull through with the previous color. So we're just going to pick it up and we're going to carry these floats along the side with us as we change colors every 2 rows. That way we have less ends to weave in, and they'll be hidden on the inside of the sweater once we seam it together. So when you pick up the float, make sure you're not pulling it too tightly. You want it to have enough slack so that it doesn't scrunch the sweater up on the side. So make sure you give it a decent length and so that it's even with the height of the stitch. And then just continue on as normal. Single crochet in the first stitch and then work your pattern repeats across, and then every 2 rows switch out your yarn. And again, this is just a repeat of rows 2 and 3 until you have the correct amount of rows for your size. Okay, so now I have the main body of my front panel complete, and we have to do the neckline shaping. I have a total of 34 rows here, so depending on what size you're making, it might be different. And now we are just going to work a few rows for our shoulder shaping and the neckline shaping. So this is the start of row 35, and you should still be switching out your yarn every 2 rows to the different color if you're doing the stripes. So make sure you do that. And then for row 35, you're going to start off with just a regular repeat of the row like you have been. The only difference is we're going to be stopping before we get all the way across the row. So go ahead and begin with your chain 1 and then work a single crochet into that first stitch. Then chain 5, skip over the picot, and then work your single crochet, chain 3, single crochet, all into the same spot of that center chain 5 in the next. And so you're just going to continue like this across. And for the size that I'm making, I'm only going to work a total of 5 picot stitches. So we have our single crochet. There's my first picot, and then I'm going to do it until I have 5 across. So yours might be slightly different if you're making a different size, so just make sure you check that. And then after you work that 5th one, chain 5, skip over the picot, and we're going to finish with a single crochet in the center of the next chain 5 space. So we have 5 picots and 2 single crochets, and so that was row 35. And then for row 36, we're just going to go directly back into our regular pattern repeat. So start off with a chain 5 and then work a picot in that very first center chain of the chain 5. And then just do your regular pattern repeat all the way across until you get to the end of the row. And then you can go ahead and change colors because that will be 2 rows of this color, and then we're going to do the same thing again and work down and back, no decreasing or anything in the next couple of rows, but we're just going to work 2 more rows for this length. So I've worked my way across and switched colors. So now we are beginning row 37, and then we're just going to do the same thing, single crochet, chain 5, skip over, and then work your picot. Do this all the way until you get to the end of this shorter row. Okay, so here we are at the end of the row, and then I just wanted to remind you guys not to miss that last little loop. It can get blended in there and a little confusing. So chain 5, skip over the last picot and work your final single crochet stitch into that chain 3 of that chain 5 from the row below. And then go ahead and turn your work, and now this is going to be row 38 for the size that I'm making, and it's just a regular repeat row. So chain 5, work your picot, skip over, work your picot in the next chain 5 space. Just do this all the way across till you get back to the other side. Okay, when you get to the end of the row, go ahead and switch your colors again, chain one and turn your work a single crochet into the very first stitch. And now this is going to be slightly different. You're going to chain 3, skip over the picot, and then just work a regular single crochet into the center space. So we're doing this last row, kind of like the trim row at the top. When you're working these chains, make sure you do not do it tightly. You want to do it a little bit loose. So again, chain 3, skip over the picot, and then work a single crochet into that center chain. And I'm not doing this tight at all. The chains need to be loose enough so that it doesn't scrunch your top up. So chain 3 again, skip over the picot, and then work a single crochet into that center chain. And you're just going to do this all the way across the row until you get to the very end. So single crochet, chain 3, skip over, and just repeat across. It's really important not to do your chains too tightly here. This is kind of going to match what the starting chain and beginning row is so that it's nice and even. Okay, I'm coming up on my last section here, so I've chained 3. And then in the chain 3 of this last chain 5 is where I'm going to work my final single crochet. So just single crochets and chain 3s for this row here. So that kind of gives us a nice clean finish so that when we seam our panels together, it's a lot easier to do and looks nice and neat. So once you have that done, you can go ahead and tie off. Make sure you have leave enough yarn to sew this shoulder to the back panel. So leave a good length of yarn. And then go ahead and cut your yarn, and we're going to repeat the same thing but on the opposite side for the other shoulder. So just go ahead and tie off, and I'll show you how to do the other side. Okay, so now we're doing the opposite shoulder. You should have your front panel laying out in front of you with that finished shoulder on the right hand side. And now we are going to be counting in from this outer side here over. So you want to count in a total of 6 picots, and then in that next chain 5 space right after is where we're going to be joining in. It's the same spot where you worked that last single crochet on the other shoulder in this first row of the neckline shaping. So count in 6 picots, and then in that next chain 5 space, join in with a slip stitch. Again, if you did a different size, you might be counting in a different amount of picot stitches. So just be aware of that. And then once you join in with a slip stitch, chain 1 and work a single crochet. So that way it matches with the other side. Now we both have a single crochet on both sides here. And then we're just going to be doing our regular pattern repeat. So chain 5, skip over the picot, and work a picot in the next space. So in that center chain of the next chain 5, do your regular picot stitch, and then just repeat across like you have normally been doing. So do this all the way until you get to the end. Okay, and then when you get to the end, you're going to chain 5 and turn your work, and just do a regular row pattern repeat across. So work your picot in that very first section there, in that very center chain 3 of the first chain 5, work your stitch, and then just do the regular pattern repeat all the way across the row. And then when you get to the end, we're just going to finish as normal. So work your chain 2, and then work your final double crochet into that single crochet stitch where we joined in. Don't forget to do your last pull through with your other color, so go ahead and bring that in. If you haven't cut it off from the other side, you can do that, and then just join in and then work the same 2 rows again. So just a regular repeat of the rows for the next 2 rows. So start off with the chain 1, single crochet in the first, chain 5, skip over, and then do the picot in the next chain 5 space, and then just repeat across till you get to the end of this row. When you get to the end, go ahead and turn, and then just do your regular row repeat back across as well. So go ahead and do this row down and then back, and I will meet you back here. Okay, and then when you get to the very end, finish with your chain 2 and then work a double crochet into that final stitch. Don't forget to bring up your other color and switch colors for this final row. And now we are going to be starting row 39 on this opposite shoulder. So switch out your new color, pull through, turn your work, and then this is going to be the same thing as the other side. So chain 1, and then in that very first stitch you're going to work a single crochet. Then go ahead and do your chain 3. Don't forget to do it loose. Do not do it tight here or it will scrunch up your shirt. So loosely chain 3 and then skip over, and then in that center chain 3 of the chain 5 space, work a single crochet and then just repeat across. So single crochet, chain 3, skip over, single crochet, and do this until you get to the end of the row. So this is what your front panel should look like. We'll add the neckline trim later on in the process to fix this area here at the front. And then you need to go back and do the same thing for the back panel, except you are going to stop after you get a certain amount of rows. So once you work a total of 34 rows, so just repeat the front panel, rows 1 through 34, and then now for the back panel we are no longer doing the neckline shaping, it's just one rectangle. So after you do the rows 1 through 34, just continue on with your regular row repeats until you have a total of 38 rows. So just do 35, 36, 37, and 38 is your regular rows, 2 and 3 repeat back and forth until you have 38 rows, and then you're going to do your final row 39 here, same as the front panel where we finished off with the single crochet chain 3 trim. So again, the back panel doesn't have any shaping, it's just 38 rows of the row repeat in the pattern repeat. And then for our final row here, go ahead and turn your work and then work a single crochet into the very first. Do your chain 3. Again, make sure you do it loosely, same as you did on the front panel at the shoulders, and then skip over the picot and then work your single crochet into that center chain 3 of the next chain 5, and then just do this all the way across the row. So work your chain 3, single crochet all the way across until you get to the very end. Okay, and then when you get to the end of the row, you can just go ahead and tie off. You don't need to leave a long tail for the back panel. We're only going to be using the long tails for seaming from the front panel. So just fasten off your work and then set it aside. And now we need to make our sleeves. So for the sleeves, it's going to start off the same way as the front and back panel, just a different amount of chains. For the size that I'm making, I'm going to chain a total of 38. So you can go ahead and grab your yarn, the same color that you started off with the front and the back panel, and then chain the correct amount for your size. So for me, it was 38. And then in the second chain from the hook, work your single crochet. And now we're just going to be doing the same thing that we did on the front and back panel. So go ahead and chain 5, skip over 3 chains, and then in that following one work your picot. So single crochet, chain 3, single crochet. So we're doing the same thing for these rows here on the sleeve, it's just a different width, so a different amount of starting chain, so you'll have a different amount of picot stitches for your stitch count as well. So for row 1, I'll have a total of 8 picots when I'm done for my sleeve. So just continue with the chain 5, skip 3, picot, repeat across until you get to the end of the row. Okay, and then for row 2, you're going to do the same thing as the other panels. Chain 5, and then work your stitch repeat across the row. So same exact thing as before, work your picot in that very first space and then just do the regular pattern repeat across. And then row 3 will be the same thing as well. Bring in your second color and switch over and just switch yarn colors every 2 rows as you've been doing with the other panels. And then just repeat rows 2 and 3 until you have a total of 28 rows. So for the size that I'm doing, I'm making 28 rows total of the rows 2 and 3 repeat. So same exact thing as the other panels. So go ahead and repeat these rows 2 and 3 until you have the correct amount for your size, and then I will meet you back when we are at the end of the sleeve. Okay, so now I have 28 rows for the sleeve here, and we're just going to finish with our row 29, which is that final trim row that makes it nice and neat. So just begin with your single crochet and then chain 3, skip over and single crochet. You can switch your color out here if you want to. I ended up just using the color that I had instead of switching it out for this final row. Then just work your single crochet into that center of the chain 5 space, chain 3, skip over, do it all the way across. Same as before, make sure your chains are not too tight. You want them more loose here. And then once you complete this, you need to go back and do it all over again for the second sleeve. So the second sleeve is going to be exactly the same. So tie off, leave a long tail for the sleeve as well so you can seam it to the sweater, and then just repeat and do it for the second sleeve. And then I will meet you back here to show you how to sew it together. Okay, so now that we have all the panels complete, we're going to sew them together. I have the back panel laying out in front of me, right side up, and then I have the front panel placed on that right side down. So the right sides are facing, and the outer sides, the wrong sides of the sweater are facing out right now, and we're going to be seaming at the shoulders. So I like to use my hook and the tail of yarn and slip stitch across. So I've just placed my hook here in the outer stitch on both of the front and the back panel. And then I'm going to slip stitch across so that I'm working through all the stitches of this first shoulder on the front panel and through the same amount of stitches on the back panel. So when I'm working my slip stitches, I'm doing it through the actual chains and not in the chain space. If you do it in the chain space, you'll be able to see the seam when you turn it right side out. So put it in the chain. It makes it a lot more neat that way. So just make sure you're putting it through the actual stitch and do it through both the front and the back panel, and then yarn over, pull through both panels and pull through the loop on your hook. And you want to do this all the way until you get to the end of that first shoulder here. And then once you get to the end, you can just fasten off. Make sure that your stitches are even and that you didn't skip any. They should be even on the front and the back. Here's what the seam looks like on the inside of the sweater. And then you need to repeat that same thing. That's what it looks like on the outside. Nice and even. And then you need to do the same thing on the other side here. And because it is opposite shoulders, that means the tail of yarn will be on the opposite side. So you're going to have to count in on the back panel now and make sure that you're joining in on the correct stitch on the back panel that you are with the front panel. So make sure it's lined up evenly and that you're joining into the same stitch, and then just work your way across and tie off. Once we have the shoulder seam, now we need to seam the sleeves to the front and back panel. So I have my front and back panel all seamed together laying out in front of me. The wrong sides are facing up, the right sides are facing down, and then you are going to take your sleeve and line it up evenly here. So place your sleeve wrong side facing up as well. And then this is a good spot to use your stitch markers to help hold us in place. So we want to evenly lay the sleeve out so that the center shoulder seam that we just did here is lined up to the very middle stitch of the sleeve. So you can count in how many chain spaces and picots you have, and then find that very center one. Here it is for me, and then line it up with the shoulder seam. And I recommend using stitch markers here to keep it in place so that your sleeves are nice and even. So you can grab a stitch marker and then just put it through that center stitch and the center seam. And then you can use another one as well to place it at the beginning and end of the sleeves too. So you want to make sure that it's lined up evenly with the same rows. Sometimes with these mesh stitches, it can like bunch up or lay weird because it's so flowy and open. So you just want to make sure your work is nice and flat, and then count down the same amount of rows. Make sure that the sleeve is not scrunched up. You want to pull it taut so that that top row is nice and tight of the sleeve. And then you can place a stitch marker on both ends here to hold your spot as well, so that everything comes out even when you are sewing it together. So I just placed a stitch marker onto the very end of the row here so I don't lose my spot. And then I'm going to pick it up so that the right sides are facing each other. That way the seam is on the same side on the inside of your work when you're done, just like at the shoulders. Then I'm just going to flip it around here so I can sew it together. And then again, I'm just going to use my hook and the tail of yarn from the sleeve and slip stitch it across. Same way that I did at the shoulders. If you prefer to use a needle, you can do that as well and just do whatever stitch that you want and actually sew it together. I just prefer the hook way, but it really doesn't matter. You can do it however you feel most comfortable doing it. So when you're working your slip stitches here, because you are working into the sides of the rows on the front and the back panel, it might be a little bit more difficult than at the shoulders, but again, you're just going to put your hook into the actual chain on that last row of the sleeve, and then insert your hook into the sides of the stitches of the front and back panel, and then just slip stitch through like you had been. So through the actual chain or stitch on the sleeve, and then I'm putting my hook into the actual side of the stitch. So I'm not working all the way around the stitch, I'm just sticking it into the side of the stitch. And then the little floats that we have from when we carried our yarn, you're just going to make sure those are above your hook as well. You can see it's laying over my hook with the rest of the yarn, and then you just slip stitch over it like they're not even there, and they will be hidden on the inside of your top when you're done seaming. So just do this all the way across until you get to the other side of the sleeve in your last stitch marker. So once we have the sleeve sewn onto the sweater, we need to sew the arm and the side of the sweater as well. So depending on how much of a tail length that you left for sewing the sleeve, you can either leave it and continue with that same tail of yarn, or if you don't have enough, you can fasten off and join in a new piece of yarn for this part. It really doesn't matter how you do it as long as we get everything sewn up. It's just preference to whichever way you want. So I'm going to leave mine on to show you and seam together. If you fasten off, you can join your yarn in at the cuff of the sleeve, and then when you get to the armpit, you can rotate and work down from the armpit down to the hem of the sweater, or you can join in at the hem and seam it up to the armpit and then down to the cuff of the sleeve. Totally doesn't matter. Here I am sewing down the side of the sleeve with the same yarn that I used to sew the shoulder area that we just completed. So I'm just going to continue down, once again working over the floats that we have here and working into the sides of the rows, same as before. So go ahead and do that whichever way you want, and then you also need to repeat on the opposite side as well. So both sleeves and sides need to be done. Okay, and then once everything is sewn together, it should look something like this, and you can turn your sweater right side out. So now the seams are hidden on the inside of the sweater, and the only thing left is adding the neckline trim. Okay, so you're going to take a new piece of yarn, and we're going to join in with a slip stitch to the very same center chain 3 of the chain 5 space where we worked a single crochet at row 35 of the shoulders. So again, your sweater is right side facing up. We have the front panel facing us here, and you can see right here on the shoulder area. Let me straighten it out a little so you can see. So this was our shoulder area. These were the shorter rows we did. So at row 35, when we worked that last single crochet in the chain 5 space, that's where we are going to be putting our hook to join in. So into that very same chain that we worked that single crochet, join in just with a regular slip stitch. And this is where we are going to begin the neckline trim. So after you slip stitch to join, you can go ahead and chain 3. So this is going to be like how we did our final trim row on all of the panels. We have to do it here at the neckline as well. So go ahead and chain 3. So make sure it's not too tight. So just yarn over and pull through 3 times. And then skip over the following picot stitch. And then in that center chain 3 of the next chain 5 space, work a regular single crochet. And then we're just going to repeat this across the front neckline of the front panel. So chain 3 again, skip over, and then work a single crochet into the center of the next chain 5 space. Chain 3, and just repeat this across until you get to the opposite side of the front panel of the opposite shoulder neckline shaping area. Okay, so now I've worked my way across and I'm going to do my final chain 3 here. Skip over that last picot and then the single crochet where we joined in on the opposite shoulder. So that same center chain 3 space where we joined in at row 35 on the opposite side of the front panel is where you're going to do your last slip stitch. So just slip stitch into it. You're in the same spot where you worked your slip stitch and single crochet from the opposite shoulder. And now we're just going to do some trim along the rest of the neckline. So after you work that slip stitch, you're just going to work single crochet stitches up the side of those rows 35, 36, 37, 38 of the shoulder where we have those floats. You're just going to single crochet directly over them so that we can hide the floats here, and you're just working your stitches into the sides of the rows. And then the stitch count here is not important. You do not have to have a certain number. It does not have to be perfect. You just want to evenly distribute them up the side because I know everyone crochets differently and has a different tension or yarn or whatever. So the stitch count is not crucial here. Just work the stitches evenly up. And then when you get to the top shoulder seam, you can single crochet in that. And then you're just going to continue along the back side of the pullover as well. So now we're on the back panel here, and you're just going to work single crochet stitches into each chain and each single crochet from that last row of the back panel. So I'm doing them into the actual chains here and not into the chain spaces. And I'm just going to work all the way across the back neckline. When I get to the other side, I'm going to work down the side of the neckline shaping area on the other side as well, working my single crochet stitches down that side. Okay, so I've worked all the way around and I'm back to where I joined in with a slip stitch for the neckline. So you can see I'm coming up on it. So these are just the final rows here, the sides of the rows 35, 36, 37, 38. It'll be different if you're doing a different size. The row number will be different, but I'm just working this the single crochets around the neckline shaping area. And then when you get to the very beginning where we joined in, you're just going to slip stitch into that stitch where we joined. And then that is it for the neckline shaping. Then you can just fasten off and all you have to do is weave in your ends. So this is what it will look like when you are complete and we just have our ends to weave in. So you can just take your needle and then just weave it back and forth. I like to do it at least 2 or 3 times hidden within the stitches, and you'll want to do it on the inside of the sweater so that you can't see the ends being weaved in. It's a little bit more tricky when you're doing open lace stitches like this just because there's not as many spots to hide the ends, but you can just work it through the sides of the chains and into the picots and then just work it back and forth 2 or 3 times. Do this for every end that you have. Then just cut the extra yarn, and that is it for this design. Guys, so much for watching, and I will catch you in the next video tutorial.